with the current rate at which the vaccinations are being rolled out, we will not reach herd immunity by October as previously projected. If we open up the country before reaching herd immunity, we will be absorbing risk with the distinct possibility of the return of the virus and the development of community spread as persons will not be adequately protected. If we get an overwhelming proportion of the population vaccinated before the scheduled opening, the virus will have nowhere to go, even if it returns. The hope was that, provided with the information about safety and efficacy of vaccines, persons would voluntarily come forward and do the right thing and get vaccinated. 12,298 persons have already done the right thing and taken their first shot. 20,739 more persons need to hasten their steps and follow the example. The question I would like to ask is, can a case be made for mandatory vaccination or the use of coercion or force in getting persons to do the right thing? My reference is from the Journal of Medical Ethics from the University of Oxford. Mandatory vaccination is typically justified on the grounds of harm to others. From a public health perspective, the use of coercion and restriction of liberty is considered when an infected individual runs the risk of harming others. Getting vaccinated benefits the individual and helps in preventing disease transmission. If the benefits are only to the individual, it is more difficult to support a mandatory vaccination policy. There is a strong case for making any vaccine mandatory or compulsory if 4 conditions are met. These are: 1, there is a grave threat to public health; 2, the vaccine is safe and effective; 3, mandatory vaccination has a superior cost-benefit profile compared with other alternatives, in this case voluntary vaccination; and 4, the level of coercion or force is proportionate. In other words, the penalties or costs for non-compliance are proportionate. Each of these conditions involve value judgments. Vaccine hesitancy is a real problem, and despite widespread education programs on the vaccine, there are many who still remain rooted in their anti-vax positions, even at the expense of the health and safety of others and the future of businesses where they work. Recently, a number of businesses came out with strong recommendations to their employees to increase the vaccination rate and make their work environment safe. This was met with much criticism. But can coercion be justified from a public health perspective? Let us examine each of these 4 hurdles that need to be crossed and see if a case can be made from a public health perspective for organizations, businesses, or even government to nudge persons in the direction of getting vaccinated. 1, is there a grave threat to public health caused by the virus? So far, there have been over 3 million deaths attributed to COVID-19. The case fatality rate can be as high as 4%. Even among survivors, there are long-term consequences for those who have been infected but survive. The immunity from natural infection is also not lifelong, as is the case in some diseases. Therefore, survivors can be reinfected if they're not vaccinated. In addition to the public health crisis we now face, the long-term COVID-19 health implications may present a grave future public health problem. We saw last year how the health systems in Europe and North America were overwhelmed, and now how India's health system is on the brink of disaster as it struggles to contain the virus, with hospital resources being stretched by COVID patients and basics like oxygen running short. We see how overnight Anguilla went from 0 to 55 active cases and are now on a 14-day lockdown. There is therefore no doubt that COVID-19 is a grave threat to public health and at a moment's notice can overwhelm our health system. 2, are the vaccines safe and effective? Globally, more than 1.04 billion doses have been administered thus far, with a significant reduction in hospitalizations and deaths in some countries. The vaccine we are using here is the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, which has been through 3 stages of clinical trials and has been found to be safe and effective. Over 34 million doses have already been administered in Europe alone. The efficacy is 76% after the first dose and rises to 82.4% after the second dose. It's 100% effective against severe disease and hospitalization after 2 doses. There were reports of 220 persons developing clots out of 34 million persons in Europe, at an incidence of 1 for 153,000 doses given, if all these cases were actually attributed to the vaccine, but this has not been proven. In the ideal world, one would like a vaccine to be 100% safe and effective with 0 risk, but that is not possible with any vaccine or medication. We therefore say that the benefits way outweigh the risk. These benefits include preventing disease in individuals, preventing severe disease, hospitalizations and deaths, effectiveness in reducing community spread, decreasing caseloads to prevent exhaustion of the healthcare system, and the protection of children and older adults who cannot be vaccinated for medical reasons. All experts have concluded that the vaccines available, including the AstraZeneca vaccine, are safe and effective. 3, is mandatory vaccination better than the alternative, which is allowing persons to come forward voluntarily? The popular position is that we do not need mandatory vaccination because people are self-interested and altruistic enough to come forward for vaccination. It is therefore hoped that we will reach herd immunity without mandatory vaccination. Here in the Federation, we need to vaccinate 33,037 persons to reach herd immunity threshold of 70%. How fast we reach herd immunity is also important. In a pandemic, time is lives. We do not have any active cases now, but it's only a matter of time before the next case arrives, with the possibility of community spread, as we see in almost every other country around the world. The longer it takes to reach herd immunity, more persons will become infected, severely ill, and may die from the disease once the virus returns. Even when national herd immunity is achieved, local areas can fall below that level over time, causing outbreaks. This is especially likely to happen where persons opposed to vaccines tend to gather in clusters. So ideally, we need better than herd immunity to ensure that people are protected both over time and in every place. Based on the current rate of vaccinations, there is good reason to doubt whether a policy of voluntary vaccination will be good enough to get us to herd immunity in ample time. We, however, continue to expand our education program with targeted messaging to get persons on board voluntarily. And the 4th hurdle, coercion is proportionate. In public health ethics, there is a familiar concept of the least restrictive alternative. The least restrictive alternative is the option which achieves a given outcome with the least coercion and least restriction of liberty. A modest penalty for not being vaccinated in a grave public health emergency could be justifiable. For example, restriction of movement of unvaccinated individuals can be justified in the interest of public health. We have seen this already being implemented with requirements of being fully vaccinated to be able to travel, or reduced or no quarantine periods for vaccinated travelers in some countries, or being vaccinated a requirement to attend mass gatherings. So how great a sacrifice or loss of liberty can be justified? A decision to have only vaccinated spectators at the Caribbean Premier League to be held here in August is justified, as it will significantly reduce the chance of this becoming a super spreader event. The decision to only have fully vaccinated individuals at other sporting events like football, basketball, and athletic meets is also justified in the interest of public health. The cost to an individual is small in the act of getting vaccinated, but the benefits to all are tremendous. Also, the harm to others by choosing not to get vaccinated is large. For some, the ultimate cost is their life. There is therefore a moral obligation to get vaccinated. Individually and collectively, we have a moral obligation and duty to get vaccinated so businesses can return to normal, so our lives can return to normal, so our country can return to normal. While being vaccinated remains an individual and voluntary decision that is free of cost, lockdowns and curfews to contain community spread caused by one's irresponsible actions are mandatory and come at great cost to the individual and society. There is therefore a strong case to be made for organizations, businesses, and governmental departments to use some level of coercion to help hasten the march towards herd immunity. Our tourism sector, for example, cannot safely open if the port workers, hotel workers, taxi drivers, and restaurant workers are not fully vaccinated. Teachers who choose not to be vaccinated should not be putting the lives of kids they teach at risk, as these kids are not eligible to be vaccinated and remain vulnerable to the disease and are dependent on the adults around them for protection. Persons working in institutions like prisons and nursing homes have a moral responsibility to do the right thing and get vaccinated as a matter of urgency, as their inaction can lead to cluster spread in these institutions where they work. Healthcare workers and other essential workers who are in regular contact with the general public have a moral responsibility to protect themselves and those who they serve through vaccination. Our security forces, the police and the army, who made an oath to protect us, should all first protect themselves by getting vaccinated. We can all see, therefore, that there is a strong case to be made from a public health perspective to mandate vaccinations for certain sectors of society. We, however, continue to urge persons to come forward voluntarily to protect themselves and others. Herd immunity benefits society collectively, so it's only fair that the responsibility of reaching it be shared evenly among society's individual members. I do believe that we can reach herd immunity if we all work together and do the right thing and roll up our sleeves voluntarily and get vaccinated. No stone must, however, be left unturned in protecting the life of each and every citizen and resident of this blessed federation, especially those who are dependent on herd immunity for protection. Let us put country above self and protect those who cannot protect themselves and get vaccinated. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wilkinson. And just a slight correction.